Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon and welcome to the post 8, How to Manage Gaslighting. Now this post this week is paired with our session last week. Particularly this week it's our practical session for the thousands of people who are in the middle of this situation right now, who are experiencing gaslighting. What can you do about it? Well, our session today hopefully will provide some answers and some concrete strategies for you to use today. And I'm aware of the consequences of gaslighting on you, on your family, on your career. You're losing your health and joy is dripping out of your life. So here are my 10 techniques. Yes, Tara's 10 techniques for managing gaslighting. And I've tried to make sure as I've developed these techniques that I've deployed some multidisciplinary strategies from social work, from psychology, but also from organisational culture. So team, let's go for this. You're in a bad situation. Let's together get you out of it. 1. Construct precise and tight boundaries. Now, the boundaries I'm talking about in this first technique are the boundaries between your private life and your professional life. That is, the way you feel and think in your life, but separating it strongly from the workplace. This is important, and it may seem counterintuitive. Do not allow leisure to bleed into the workplace. So you know what? Don't go to the pub after that seminar. Don't talk about your relationships or your family with co-workers, and try to avoid, if you can, expressing your fears and expressing your worries. And I know this is terrible. We don't want to live in this type of age and environment. But the reason I'm saying this to you is that gaslighters use the information that you give them and they use it to attack you. So don't give them any information. I've worked in a lot of pretty toxic environments, and I've worked for so many people that gaslight as easily and as quickly as they make a cup of coffee. But what I learnt, and thankfully I learnt it very early on in my academic career, in my first 3 jobs when I was in my 20s, is that I learnt to close the literal and the metaphoric door between my private life and the workplace. And also I was aware very, very early on, and this is a good tip, this one, don't share your achievements in your workplace. I know that seems incredibly counterintuitive, right? You know, this is an environment where people basically open an envelope and they put a post on Instagram. I understand that. But you know what? Within your institution, don't share your achievements. And I focused on being an outward scholar rather than terribly internally focused on one institution. Because you see, team, the gaslighters want you to focus on these internal relationships. Spend all your time answering emails, micromanaging these hyper-personal relationships, these minor issues. They want you to lose the time in your life focusing on these minor and invented traumas, rather than producing outstanding international teaching and research, so maintaining an outward focus. I learnt that the greatest power was to create an enormous separation between the work that I'm paid to do in the workplace and the rest of my life. So this means, and this is challenging in these times, this means you have to be independent, you have to be self-aware, and you must not be reliant on the opinions or the behaviours of others. So don't wait for your boss or senior colleagues to offer you any compliments at all. What I need you to do is disconnect from the opinions and the behaviours of others. So do a good job, That's crucial. But then shut down your feelings and your commentary on that good job. Now, in those early 3 jobs, as a very young woman, I realised for some reason that it was my research achievements that were causing the bad behaviour from inverted commas colleagues. So no one cared too much about teaching qualifications and achievements and so forth, but any research achievement seemed to be creating profound resentment. So I saw this very early on as a young woman. So that meant from those very early years, I made a decision to work hard, to publish hard, but I didn't produce that work for other people's approval. The research had and has intrinsic worth, rather than only gaining value when empowered people say that it might be worthwhile. So I'll give you a great example of this very, very early in my career. Again, young academic in my 20s. And I was working for a very, 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 very poor Vice-Chancellor with a very, 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 very poor management team. And they'd valued and nominated a particular staff member for a citizenship award in a particular state. And they enacted this incredible publicity machine around this male professor, made a very big deal of it. But what they didn't know is that I'd also been nominated for this citizenship award outside of the university. So a wonderful person I know outside of the university had nominated me. But because I didn't broadcast and don't broadcast these lovely things, no one in the university knew that I'd been nominated. So when this very, very, very poor Vice-Chancellor and his very, very poor team arrived for the awards ceremony, suddenly they looked over in the auditorium and I was there. Hi. And of course, I'd been nominated by a truly inspirational person who, of course, was very close to the Premier of this particular state. So during the evening, the Premier of the state came over to the table and talked with his friend and met me and met my wonderful family. And again, you know, at the end of my life, the experience of my then 70-something father meeting the Premier of the state in which he was born was a truly lovely moment, can I say, and that was great. But the funny bit of this story was that when the Premier came over and was talking with the table, I could see this Vice-Chancellor and this senior management team crawling over each other and hurtling, trying to get to the table so they could get a photograph with the Premier. And I remember to this day, and you can see it still makes me laugh, I looked out of the corner of my eye and it looked like a skit from the Three Stooges. So these men falling over each other, trying to get towards this table. And of course, the moment they sort of got over there, the Premier went, "Who are these people?" and then returned to his own party. So I have hundreds of examples of this during my career. I've used this tactic to just shut down information within an institution for 25 years. It works really well. So what I want you to do for me is focus outward, beyond your institution, rather than focus inward. And this is what I think institutional secrecy about achievements does in an era where people just sort of celebrate walking through a door, yeah? It unsettles the gaslighters. If the gaslighters don't have information about you, then they've got no fodder to deploy. If they're starved of information, they're starved of their fuel. And that is one way to stop gaslighting. 2, keep accurate records. Keep every email, keep every message, take screen grabs of comments during meetings, and save and provide detailed information within Microsoft Calendar entries. The point of gaslighting is to doubt yourself, to doubt the accuracy of your memory. So make sure that you've replied to all those emails, but most importantly, you've saved and stored all those emails. And what I'd also advise is make sure you then save it onto a private computer outside of the organisation as well. Now, this evidence is crucial. I cannot stress this enough, team. When you, and it will be a when you at some point have to log and call out the gaslighter, you are going to need evidence, not feelings. You're going to need evidence. It's not about your opinion, because remember, the point of gaslighting is a group of people are trying to disconnect you from reality, okay? So you have to have evidence to verify the behaviour of others. Now, I'll give you a really easy and wonderful example of this. When I was a full professor, there was a head of school, this is when I was in England, and there was a head of school and we were having a meeting, and he stated, I'd never sent an email doubting your credibility, because, you know, I was a younger woman at that point, and he would endlessly send these emails logging that I didn't quite know what I was doing and I was a bit incompetent, right? Just gaslighting, drip, 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 drip. And in this particular meeting, he said, no, I never sent that email. I never sent an email. So, of course, at the conclusion of that meeting, I was able to walk back to my office and in less than 2 minutes, find the email that he sent, send it to him, noting that he said this email didn't exist. I also CC'd it to an HR representative, and I CC'd it to his line manager. And of course, this was an example of a gaslighter lying, and he had been found out in the lie. Can I say, quite wonderfully too, in this email, he was delightfully sexist too. So there was this sort of, don't worry your pretty little head about these things. So that was all in the email as well. So that's the gift of evidence. So if gaslighters are lying, you have evidence to trap them in the lie. Therefore, take all the emotion you can out of these emotional situations and rely on evidence. 3, keep a journal. Now, the reading I did this week, almost every bit of research that I used and read and talked about the importance of a journal. Now, I know it's all a bit hippie and I'm an old goth, but I tell you what, in the case of gaslighting, journals do make a difference. And I'll tell you why. Yes, it provides a way to log the evidence of what is occurring, but the gift of the journal is that you can reflect on what is happening and keep yourself emotionally even, right? So Deborah Vinal, in her 2021 book called Gaslighting, focused on how to disrupt the gaslighting relationship. So she argued that the gaslighter will not change. So if you are waiting for this person to change, they will never change. So by keeping a journal and focusing on yourself, you can reflect on what is occurring, because gaslighting is based on manipulation. If you keep a daily journal, if you can name what is happening to you, then you can start to question the insecurity, and you can also realise there is no reason for you to feel shame. So this means in a journal, you have the space to do the internal work, and you have a space to manage your emotion and work out the next steps. Okay. 4, great one, gain support from colleagues. Now, gaslighting departments and organisations, including schools, including universities, create insider and outsider groups and configure a group of pretty vulnerable people. Gaslighting works and operates well when good people are silent and do nothing. And I understand why they do nothing, because they're frightened that it's going to be their turn next. But the key, if you can, is to mobilise your friends in the workplace, because an individual is vulnerable, a group is less vulnerable, and gaslighting is critiqued when the behaviour is watched, it's logged, and it's spoken about. So what happens is gaslighting lives and breathes in secrecy and in silence, but it dies in the light and the heat of scrutiny. And speaking of scrutiny, 5, ensure external scrutiny and awareness of the situation. Oh yeah. Gaslighting and bullying is based on a person in power manipulating and controlling a situation. Now, as we discussed in the last vlog, it is the mediocre, incompetent and failing managers and leaders that are using gaslighting so that their mediocrity and their incompetence is not revealed. But the quickest way to shrivel this behaviour with precision is to build relationships with colleagues outside of the organisation, and indeed, even better, outside of your country. Gaslighters are terrified that they will be discovered, and they're terrified that they're going to be called out by people even more powerful than them. As Stephanie Sarkis has realised, this was great, Stephanie Sarkis, she argued that gaslighters are, quote, obsessed by optics, end of quote. So the gift of the 3Ds, digitisation, disintermediation and deterritorialisation, is that very local and very small events of gaslighting very, very quickly can gain an international or global audience. So therefore, build these partnerships, build these collaborations through your career, but always work beyond your institution, work beyond your nation. And that international scrutiny provides accountability and visibility. The gaslighter wants you to feel shame. But you know what? Don't feel shame. You have done nothing to create this behaviour, and therefore public scrutiny creates public accountability. 6, oh, I love this one. Recognise the power of social media. As I conducted the research on gaslighting, I saw something really remarkable, and this is new, in a discussion of gaslighting and social media. And this research, again, is from Stephanie Sarkis. This is great. Now, she showed, unbelievably, that gaslighters do not use social media. So they are not active on Twitter, or they have those famous protected tweets on Twitter. And they also mask their identity by, for example, not having a public Google Scholar profile. So that means they're therefore not available in public for public accountability and public scrutiny. Wow. Now, what this means for the rest of us is incredibly important, and this is the way to a better future. This means if we all make a decision for the use of a compassionate and kind social media, a different type of community, that is one way to change the world. And that's one way to change this behaviour. We all know the costs of trolling, the nastiness of trollers, but do you notice the gaslighters? They don't want the memory, the accountability that exists in Twitter, the capacity to go back through years of tweets and find very poor behaviour. They don't want that accountability. Now, this is an important issue. Remember that Twitter gives us and gives behaviour visibility if we choose to be honest, respectful and decent. And the idea that gaslighters are frightened of social media is incredibly important. So therefore, we can create a new type of community that protects others and also notes the dreadful behaviour of our leaders and managers. 7, Locate the techniques of gaslighting and call it early. Yep. Now, one of the critiques we know that exists in this literature is that it does focus too much on narcissists. And as I argued in the last vlog, actually it's the poor and mediocre managers that are now using gaslighting as a management technique. Now, I was very impressed by Stephanie Sharp's book on gaslighting. She recognised the importance of calling out gaslighting as early as possible. And she gave us a series of trigger words and phrases that when they are used, realise this is the start of a gaslighting situation. So what are examples of these words and phrases? You're overreacting. You're stupid, or that's stupid. You're being too sensitive. You're only saying that because you're so insecure. Wow, you're being overdramatic. I was just joking. This is not a big deal. Don't you get worked up. You're just hysterical. No one believes you. Or you're reading too much into this. Oh yeah. Also, if you see somebody when you just express a concern or an issue, they immediately go to anger or rage. All of those proxies are important to watch as a gaslighting situation is about to emerge. The best way to manage this type of situation is do not allow the gaslighters to be deflected from the main issue. So if you are asking a concrete, important, evidential question, then ask it in a meeting if you can, a public meeting with your department. And if you do have mates in your department, tell your mates that you're going to ask this question in public, and keep the question simple and clear. And that'll block the gaslighter's opportunity to move it to trivial issues or move it to personal issues. So let's now move to 8. Remember the importance of friendship and reach out. Remember the importance of friendship and reach out. What happens when a worker is confronted by gaslighting is catastrophic. A loss of motivation, a loss of self-esteem, one's career does not progress, anxiety, depression, and often physical illness, and indeed post-traumatic stress. The key to rebuilding and recentering this person is friendship. For all of us watching this video today, we need to support the people who are going through this. And we support them through friendship. Provide that emotional support. But further, write references for them. If we can help them get out of that workplace, then we really need to do that. The best strategy to fight these gaslighters is to, most importantly, isolate yourself from the gaslighter. Create as much space as you can from them. They want to get very, very close to you. Create as much space as you can. And then call for help from your peers and your friends to help you get out of it. Now, most of us have experienced behaviour like this. We know how incredibly serious it is. Most of us have lost friends to academic life, or indeed our friends have suicided through this behaviour. So what I'd advise is use a private email address. And by the way, that's another really important tip. Make sure you've got your institutional email, but also have a private email address and use it. And use that private email address to call out help with your friends. And they can help you work hard to find another job. If an opportunity comes up, they can tell you, they can offer solutions, and yes, they can write you references. Now, I know you are feeling shame. Don't. Please don't. You have done nothing to create this situation. Tell people and support will follow. 9. Know that you may have to leave. Now, I know the point of the vlog this week was to provide techniques and strategies to help you manage it when you're in the middle of it, but there is no doubt, and all the literature confirms this, unfortunately, in almost all cases, the person who has suffered from gaslighting has to leave the organisation for it to end. Now remember, all the way through, take good notes, inform HR as early as possible, and make sure as many people outside the organisation know what is happening to you. But sadly and inevitably, gaslighting ends when the person who is suffering from it leaves the organisation. Now, of course, this perpetuates the behaviour because the manager hasn't been called out on what they've done, so person after person after person leaves. But you know what? That's not your concern at this point. Your health and your well-being is what's important. And for most of us, that involves leaving the organisation, and don't judge yourself for that. Don't retaliate. Don't play their game. They love a good fight. Don't give them a fight. They love friction. Don't give them friction. Leave the organisation mentally before you're able to leave physically. Leaving the organisation is what most people have to do. Now, from my gaslighting, I used it as a positive decision moment in my life. I made a decision at that point that I was going to enter leadership and management in our universities so that nobody in my watch would ever have to experience this situation again. But I finished a leadership degree, I did a master's in leadership, and I write on leadership to this day to improve the system. So yes, the manager that had a bit of a gaslighting vibe with me, they had a win. But the culture that enabled that to happen imploded. Leaders were not reappointed, so they suffered. It just took a bit longer. But when the behaviour starts, then you need to apply for work. Get out of there. And my final one, 10. Don't look for closure. We all know, I think, that recovery is a process. Treat it as a process. But to survive gaslighting is going to require some decisions and some moments of thought from you. And the wonderful Deborah Vinal's research captured many of these stages. This is my sort of truncated version of what is a very long and strong book. She argued that you have to accept what has happened, understand the cycle of gaslighting and how it has damaged you, spend time focusing on yourself and centre yourself once more, set boundaries to guard your public and your private space, make decisions who is part of your life and who is no longer part of your life, develop new relationships, never minimise what has occurred, name and describe your gaslighting, and address and understand the patterns by which you were demeaned and devalued. So these strategies are strong because you're learning to trust yourself again. Gaslighting takes your reality, it takes your truth, and it crushes it. So you need to take the time to be whole, to be complete, and to centre yourself once more. And that's why closure, to be frank, closure rarely happens with gaslighting. You'll find throughout the rest of your life, the doubt, the fear will return at a moment of stress. But continue to return to the fundamentals that we've talked about today, and they are strategies for not only your survival, but your success. I want to return confidence to your life and trust to your life. Now, thank you so much, wow, for everything that you've shared with me. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for the stories that you've told me. I hold them in my hands and I carry them forward with me in my life. I want to acknowledge also that, remember, this is not about you. The contemporary workplace and the workforce, they want you to feel insecure. It's a collectivised mode of gaslighting, and this is a way to do what I've called the re-proletarianisation of the workforce. So there is no future with the gaslighter. Remember, our current institutions, including our universities, support the self-absorbed academic. They support the people who endlessly talk about their own profiles and, of course, basically nick other people's work. Our institutions support that. But if we speak of these issues, we use the words and we label the behaviour, we can create spaces for alternatives. We can create spaces for your future. I wish you love, light and peace. Tea out.